Welcome to Liberty Revealed, the only show where you will learn about all things liberty. Your host for the show is a registered libertarian who's been involved in politics for more than 25 years. He has a passion for teaching others about the concept of personal liberty. Please welcome your host, Mike Mahoney.
I am a big believer in personal liberty. To me, my rights end where your rights begin. What this means is laws should ensure that your freedom to live your life as you choose does not impact everyone else's freedom to live their lives as they choose. This is personal liberty. If you want to learn more about personal liberty and get more from this show, sign up to receive my 10-page guide on personal liberty entitled Liberty Revealed. You need to fill out a simple form located at yogispodcastnetwork.com/Liberty Revealed. That's YOGIS podcastnetwork.com/Liberty Revealed. Once you read through that ebook, you are guaranteed to be in a position to apply the philosophy of personal liberty.
Welcome back to another episode of Liberty Revealed. I'm Mike Mahoney, your host. This is the show where we put liberty at the forefront of every discussion. Today, I have a guest. His name is Greg Kotstafis. Greg was humbled by the loss of his business, his family, and his freedom. He's been a career salesperson, entrepreneur, and business creator most of his life. He's certified in wellness, relationships, and communication. He has coached hundreds of people. An expert in sales, connecting with clients, and overcoming stress, Greg provides customized life balance programs to individuals, groups, organizations, and corporations to create a strong work environment. He empowers people to take a look at adversity as an opportunity for change and positive growth, leading to increased productivity and a better quality of life. He is the father to 3 amazing daughters, a son to 2 loving parents, and a loyal partner to his future soon-to-be wife. Greg is an active contributor to multiple blogs, podcasts, and webinars. He's also a weekly volunteer at Project Angel Heart. Greg is also the former president of On-Broadway Toastmasters 2016 and Toastmaster of the Year 2017. He's presently an active member of the National Speakers Association in Colorado. He was also the former leader of the Prisoners Against Crime team. You can find out more about Greg at veracitygp.com. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to jump right in. Why don't you tell the listeners a little background about you and, what led up to where you are today in life?
How far back do you want me to go? I've been in pretty much in sales my entire life. I've been an entrepreneur for a long, long time. Opened and operated multiple businesses, as you know, and as we've talked about briefly. I had one very successful business for about 14 years that ran into some financial trouble after the crash of 2008. And because of my unwillingness to let go of what was happening, I ended up committing some crimes of theft, got sentenced to prison, and did 14 months in a minimum level facility here in Colorado. Got out, transformed my life, changed my ways, and now I'm trying to do as much as I can possibly to give back to society and also to give back to people in general and repay my victims.
Great. So explain to me, how does it feel for you when you are suddenly faced with that prospect of spending some time in jail for, mistakes that you made? I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, it doesn't sound to me from reading your story like, you're one of those people who intentionally set out to do some of the things that happened. It just sounds like circumstances were what they were and you made some bad choices. So what did it feel like to know that you were going to be facing the loss of your freedom because of those choices?
It was devastating. I mean, it was very, very difficult. Being away from my children was the most difficult part of it. No, and I didn't really think about the repercussions of after I got out, which, to be honest, are, in my opinion, more severe than when you're in. Because trying to come back after having that label put upon you was very, very difficult. But, before I went in, I was obviously nervous, a little bit scared, but, I quickly snapped out of that and realized I just had to do everything I could to get back out as soon as possible. That was my main goal.
So you mentioned how trying to recover after you came back out was the worst part. Can you explain maybe some of the experiences you had and things that you faced when you did come back out and try to recover?
Well, your credibility is gone, right? And obviously, that's the biggest thing. You have to start all over again. All of the relationships you had, the level of trust there has been hammered pretty hard. Any new relationships you try to form with me, I never once didn't admit exactly what happened to anybody that I was going to have a relationship with, whether they were a friend or a girlfriend or somebody I was going to work for. So I had to disclose all that information right up front. And, it's hard for people to understand, and it takes time for people to trust you again. And that's been a 7-year process for me. And it continues to this day. And honestly, I don't know if it'll ever stop. And I'm okay with that because it keeps me on the path that I want to be on.
So, what do you have to say to business owners who potentially find themselves in a similar situation where they're having financial difficulties and they're not sure what to do, and they're faced with the prospect of, you put it in your article, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so what ends up happening. What struck me from reading that story is, you're supposed to, you had a deal. You mentioned a deal that from someone from Canada who, you canceled the deal and didn't deliver the vehicle, but didn't give back the money not because you didn't want to, but because it got sucked up into the quagmire of debt that you had. What do you say to business people who are faced with that? What do you think they should do?
Well, actually, I did pay that person back. I paid him back all of his money, but it took me some time to do it. But again, he was the tipping point, because once I finally did repay him, he contacted the authorities in the local town where I was living in Boulder and started the whole process. I had woken up and I had sought out some help from a family friend who was going to help me financially to try to get through it, but I was a little too late, probably a couple of years too late. I don't know if you call that a little too late. I think the reality is, to answer your question, is that people need to have a community. They need to have friends that they can rely upon. They need to have, trusted people that they can talk about. And trying to bury my shame of how screwed I was the hardest part, right? Because I'd had this business so long. It wasn't like I just started it and then it failed, right? I'd had it and I'd been established, and people kind of knew me as owning that business and being successful, that it was very difficult for me to just come clean and say, hey, listen, I'm really stuck. I need help. And just like lay everything out on the table for somebody to see, to try to help me. And I really honestly think that this wouldn't have happened to me if I'd done that years prior. I probably would have filed bankruptcy. In the end, I think people definitely would have not been paid, but that would have been through the legal proceedings of bankruptcy rather than me trying to hold on for a longer period of time, which I definitely think magnified the problem and caused more harm than me catching up. So I think people need to you need to have a group of people, or at least somebody that you can confide in that's strong enough to tell you what they really think you should do.
Well, in a small way, I relate to what you're saying because, I've actually been married twice. And in my first marriage, the issue there was that anything that came up, a small issue, large issue, let's say for whatever reason, business was slow and, couldn't afford to pay the electric bill. That's something you normally should be able to just go to your wife and say, hey, we're having a problem. What are we going to do? Can't afford to pay the electric bill. But with the wife that I had at the time, if I did that, it was like all of a sudden, World War III and all sorts of stress. And so you kind of make this choice of, all right, I can either keep it to myself and deal with it somehow, or I can talk to her about it and add to the stress. And I've found that with my new wife, I can talk to her about anything. So I agree with you. I think having the support system where you can, hey, here's my problem, let's work on that together, is huge, especially with the level of financial difficulty you were having. I can only imagine it's embarrassing, but I think what we do as humans is we think, all right, it's embarrassing. I'm not going to say anything. I'm under the gun, but it doesn't go away. So you probably should find somebody you can talk to, and maybe they can find a way to help you out of it. Maybe someone would have said to you, why don't you declare bankruptcy? Something, probably crossed your mind numerous times, but,
Well, it's funny. I actually had somebody say that to me, who's a very good friend of my father, who's owned and operated multiple hospitals all over the world. And he didn't even know my situation, but right after 2008 happened, and I was struggling, like like 60 days after that happened, I wasn't selling anything. My company was just completely flat. My business was flat. And he told me right then and there, he's like, listen, this is never going to come back. It's going to take years. It's not going to take a month. It's not going to take 2 months, Greg. You're not going to be fine. He's like, your whole industry is completely turned upside down because of the financial crisis. He's like, so you need to file bankruptcy now, close your doors, and let everybody go. If I had done that, taken his advice, then none of this would have happened, because that was way, way back, right? But later on, as I was trying to muddle through it, I did see glimmers of hope that I was able to try to fix it, and things got better, a couple of years later. In the end, I had the same situation. We lived in a big house. My wife, I wanted to sell it. She didn't want to sell it. That became a big argument. I wanted to drastically change our lifestyle, which is not something that she was on board with. And that became another issue as well. So, yeah, I think the partner you have or the company you keep is really, really important.
Yeah, good advice. And I see, you have a book called The Truth About Lies. Can you tell the listeners about that and, what's in that book?
Sure. It's called The Truth About Lies, How Admitting Nothing Can Cost You Everything. And what's in the book are just different bits and pieces of things that I learned quickly regarding, what happened to me and what things I think I should have had in place. Meaning, how important it was to have a really solid core group of friends. Trying to think of what else as I flip through the book. It talks about how much the time when I finally stepped out of the whole situation and had some time to reflect. In other words, get out of the chaos. I really had time to have clarity and see how poorly I behaved and how many mistakes I made. So people need to take time to reflect on those things, and they need to learn different things and trying to understand the power of saying no and holding your ground, even though other people didn't want to. It's definitely something that I've strongly focused on since being released.
So I take it now transparency is probably a huge issue that you try to keep at the forefront.
Yeah, it's not. It's not even hard to put it at the forefront. It's like the number one thing. If something's bothering me or something's going on, I'm very quick to state it and understand that the consequences may not be, or the answer may not be what I want to hear. But I know that if I don't say it, then I'm not living to my truest self, which is important based on what happened. So I have to be really direct and honest with everybody. And that's worked out really well for me, to be honest, because the friends that I have now, because of that, have turned out to be really wonderful, caring, giving people, but they also will tell me exactly how they feel in regards to my actions, and I can do the same with them, and nobody gets hurt. Nobody's feelings gets upset.
Yeah, well, kudos to you for, learning a lesson from all this and, turning things around. I think that's a huge thing, because I think a lot of times people feel when they find themselves in a situation, they feel like they're the victim. And I think somewhere in there, you turn to that around and realize that, you're in control and you get to decide which direction your life goes. And like, a lot of self-help people will tell you, you create your own situation. So I would imagine that with your newfound transparency, that your new group of friends probably has an even higher level of trust for you than your original group of friends.
Yeah, I never really had a solid group of original friends before. And some of these people came into my life later. A couple were friends before everything happened, and they carried through with me. But now it's just a different level of, they see all the things I'm doing and all the things I'm trying to do to improve myself every day. So they have a higher respect for all that I'm trying to do and understanding who I am as a person. So you're right. I mean, it's just definitely higher quality people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, one of the things we talk about on this show a lot is just, personal freedom and being able to do the things you want to do on a regular basis. And I would imagine after having to go, to prison for a short while, you learned just how important that really is. I mean, can you describe that for us? Like what the contrast was between, normal life and that?
You mean normal life being life when you're incarcerated as opposed to how it is now? or normal life, like from what it was before and to what it is now for me?
More like what it is now to being incarcerated.
Okay. Well, as everybody knows, when you're incarcerated, you have no choices. You can't decide anything. I mean, you very few things aside from when maybe you want to go to the bathroom, and even that can be sometimes dictated by when you're allowed to. So the smallest little choices and the smallest little liberties that you have are gone. And I quickly realized that I had to kind of really structure my life while I was in there to spend time doing what I could do when I wanted to do it in order to have that kind of freedom. But being able just to step out now and be able to make the choices of how I interact with people, getting to see my children whenever I want, being able to eat whatever I want, just being able to be outside, the simplest of things that probably 99% of the world takes for granted. I no longer take for granted because I realized that, at one point they were gone and I was stuck and I was surrounded by a bunch of people I didn't want to be around. And so that is even more of a reason now why I choose to try to find the highest quality, positive people to spend time with every day rather than waste time on people that are negative or self-serving.
Yeah, well, you always hear people say that surround yourself with the kind of people that uplift you and build you up rather than tear you down. And I think that's also a mistake that people make is they ignore that and they chase the money or whatever, and they find themselves in a corner and then they don't know how to get out. I think most people don't understand, like that saying, you don't know what you've lost until you don't know what you had until you've lost it. Most people don't get to experience a way to fix that because that's usually applied to like someone passing. You don't realize what a great father you had, let's say, until they pass. It's one of the things I'm impressed by. In your bio, you say, loving son to two parents, two wonderful parents. You give them a lot of credit, and I think that's great. You're in a unique position because you had one situation where you were pretty much, we could say, on top of the world. And then all of a sudden, you like you just said, you don't get to make any choices. You're at the mercy of someone else, and they're telling you what to do. Mm-hmm. So now you're back out, and you're able to make your choices again. And you said it's taken 7 years, and you're still working on this. It seems like how much time passed from say when you had your initial struggles till when all of this went down? How much time passed there?
Before I got sentenced?
Yes.
Oh, probably a couple of years.
So a couple of years of bad mistakes and bad decisions is now taking you almost a decade to kind of dig yourself out of. And I think that's probably something listeners should pay close attention to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think listeners need to pay close attention because it's not going to be solved in a couple of years. To be honest, in my mind, it's a lifelong journey. The stigma of, in my situation of being labeled a felon always sticks with you. And I'm not going to be by any means trying to be a victim here because I'm not. And there's plenty of other people that I hurt that are really the victims. So I'm actually very thankful that for the second half of my life, I get to spend my time and energy trying to help other people, do good things, have quality relationships, and all of those things. But regardless of all my actions and regardless of all the great things I do the rest of my life, no matter what, it's always going to be a little bit of yeah, but, meaning, yeah, he's a great guy, he's doing all these great things, but did you know he went to prison? I've had that literally happen to me before. And people are they're very quick to judge. They don't forgive. And I'm referring even to some previous family members, which I still butt heads with, that want to reflect on the past. And people love to go back and talk about all the mistakes you made. And what you do in the current moment may or may not be recognized. And that's okay. But for your listeners out there, they need to recognize, especially even today, you don't even need to be incarcerated or arrested. You can make one catastrophic mistake that gets caught online on social media, and your life can change forever. Because it doesn't go away. That's something I think people really need to realize.
Yeah, that's very true. And also sounds like probably one of the biggest learnings you've had out of all of this. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I mean my Google profile's a mess. I mean it's not. I've actually tried to get some of it removed, and they're not going to remove it. So now I have to. All I can do is put as much positive to offset the negative, and let it go. And I think that's been really eye opening for me. But I've been very happy. It feels good just to be doing more positive things than to be dwelling on the past because you can't change it.
Yeah, as you said that, it made me think of something. I mean, I'm 54, so I've kind of lived through half my life with no internet and the other half with, very prominent internet. And, I always, like with my kids, I tell them, Google's your friend. You want to know the answer? Go to Google and, you can look up the answer, or at least get a start towards finding the answer. And I think I hadn't thought about this, but it's true. Nowadays, like maybe 20 years ago, had something like this happened, people would have had a hard time finding out
Right.
that it happened. Now they just type your name into Google and boom, there's all this information. And so it haunts you. And even, that's why I actually think, well, don't even think, I know it's great that you're taking the approach of uh, being honest with people right away. There's always that, when you relate it to dating, for instance, there's always that discussion, like, when do you tell somebody this information? And I always say to people, the sooner the better, because all it takes is a Google and they go, hey, why didn't you tell me about this? And, no matter how much you say I was about to, or I was going to tell you on the third date or whatever, they don't believe you. They think you're trying to hide it. So I commend you for being honest about it, because that too has to kind of be a humbling experience.
Well, yeah, my role after I got out was the second date. That's when I told anybody I was seeing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's and the woman I'm engaged to now, we still joke about it because I told her on the second date, but she was actually very kind. Even said that's okay. Her words were, "That's okay. I still like you." And it still chokes me up to hear what she said, because it was just unconditional acceptance of being like, it's okay. We'll see where it goes. But there were plenty of other people that just didn't, immediately they're like, oh no, I can't. And that's fine. But it's the only way to be. I mean, honestly, the more transparent people are, especially in today's world, I think it's a rarity. And I think that people are drawn to it. I definitely have had many experiences where I've quickly shared my story and people have just kind of looked at me like, I can't believe you just told me that. But, doesn't bother me. Like, I don't care. I don't mind sharing it. And I really have become very thick skinned to it, that if people don't want to hang with me because of that, that's fine. Just move on. That's it.
I've run for political office numerous times. And so, of course, when you do that, you become a, quote, public figure, end quote. And people think they can say anything they want about you, whether it's true or not true. And you should just accept that. And what I've done is, I have a motto: what other people's opinion of me is none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
You know who you are, and I know who I am. And it's not really up to us to convince other people who we are. They have to either take the time to get to know us or not. And that's not our business, right? I mean, if
Sure.
someone doesn't, like you said, if someone doesn't want to hang out with you because of something you did in your past, and clearly the government itself thinks you've, paid your dues and you're doing what you're supposed to do and you're following all the rules, that's their choice. And you and I, all we can do is just live our life the best way we know how, and be honest and be transparent. And like you said, you're going to attract the right people, and you're going to have that group that you can rely upon. And I kind of I actually relate to that, because first marriage, very difficult making friends. I think partially because we butt heads a lot. Second marriage, probably 10 times as many friends as we had before.
Yeah.
And I find that anytime we've struggled, it's so much easier, because like you said, there's someone you can go to and say, hey, I'm having this struggle. Can I vent? And a lot of times I don't even want advice. I just want to get it off my chest to somebody that will listen,
Right.
So, well, I really appreciate your time. And I want to give you a chance to tell people, where to find you. And, if there's something that we haven't covered and you want to talk about, please feel free to do that now.
All right. Well, they can find me at veracitygp.com, as you mentioned earlier. I'm also the host of the Pitching the Truth podcast. which I'll definitely replay this podcast on my network. And I write a lot of articles on Medium. I try to do that quite often. On Instagram, GPK_truth, and also on Twitter. And of course, Facebook, Pitching the Truth as well. So you can find me at any one of those spots and check out what I'm doing. I'm just trying to give as much information as I can to help other people and do some public speaking here and there. And generally, my message is that I think that, I want everybody to try to learn from my mistake. I want them to pay attention. But really, when it came down to it, as you have mentioned before, we were both probably in a relationship that didn't have a good flow of communication between each other. And that just doesn't apply to a marital relationship. I'm talking about any relationship you have with any person. If it's not an open flow of communication, good and bad, meaning somebody's not telling you what they want you to hear, and at the same time, they're not trying to beat you down to believe what they want you to believe, those relationships are critical. They're really very, very important. They're rare to find. And I seem to be finding new ones like that all the time. And I think it's because that's the way I treat other people. So I think your listeners should try to follow that path if they can.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great advice. I really appreciate you telling that. I think it's great advice. I think too many of us sweep those issues under the rug. And I mean, I know for me, with my second marriage here, I have boundaries and they're very clear. And when the boundaries are crossed, in a nice way, I speak up about it. And I find that you're absolutely right. You get a much healthier relationship. And like you said, it's not just with your marriage, it's with friends, family, anybody that you come in contact, even business. I mean, I even took the time recently. I do technology consulting, and I took the time recently to change my contract because I was getting a lot of people contacting me like on a Sunday afternoon asking questions that they probably could have waited until Monday to ask. So I just modified my contract a little bit to charge more for after hours work. And it's miraculous how people respect that. And, you give a boundary, and as long as most people have boundaries and they don't express them. But when you express your boundaries, I think people are more than happy to operate within those boundaries. That's just respect, right? Just common decency. So, it's great advice you have there. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. I really appreciate your time. And, I encourage my listeners to listen to your podcast and to review your website. I did that myself and find it really interesting. So that's it for this episode of Liberty Revealed. If you like what you've heard, please rate us a 5-star on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. And if you'd like to learn more about personal liberty, grab your free copy of my book, Liberty Revealed, by heading over to yogispodcastnetwork.com/Liberty Revealed. And until next time, live free.
Thanks for listening to Liberty Revealed, the show where you learn about all things liberty. Please visit the show's website at yogispodcastnetwork.com/LR, where you can reach out to Mike directly with your questions and comments. Again, that is yogispodcastnetwork.com/LR.